Welcome to the Exchequer GDPR module training video. The GDPR module in Exchequer helps you identify fields that contain personal identifiable information and helps you anonymise those fields after a certain amount of time. What I'll go through is the actual setup of this module, and then we'll show you how it actually works. So some of the first things to mention about the GDPR module are against the user settings. So within the system setup and the user management screen, every single user has this new box down at the bottom of their settings to highlight PII fields. And essentially what that means is that if that user has it ticked, they will have a colour next to the PII fields on the Exchequer screen. Users that don't have that ticked won't see that colour. And the reason that we've set that against the username and password setting is really because you'd probably only want your database administrators to see the information that highlights PII fields within the system. The next part of setup, again within here, is all to do with access to the module itself. So on your access settings, within utilities, you have this new GDPR folder. You've got settings for the PII tree and settings for the Anonymisation control center. So again, what I would advise is that generally a database administrator would have access to the PII tree and the control center, and your day-to-day inputters within the system probably don't even need to see that information, so there's no point in actually setting the access on there. So when it actually comes to setting up the module itself, the control center is held underneath this procedures menu. So procedures and anonymisation control center. The first thing that you'll do is come in here and set the module up. So under setup, you have this GDPR configuration. And GDPR configuration will obviously apply to personal information only. And what we're saying within Exchequer is personal information will be held against either a trader, so a customer or supplier, or against an employee. So the first thing that you would do when setting up this module is give it a retention period. And what this means is it allows you to set a period of years that you want to hold that data for. And that might be to comply with HMRC or some other kind of legislation that you need to comply with. For the purpose of this exercise, I'm just going to leave it set to 1 year. Then we have to tell the system what we want to do with notes, letters and links once this retention period has expired. So within notes, you've got simply two settings: either leave all of the notes intact or delete all of the notes. Only you really know what kind of information you store in your customer and supplier notes. And obviously, if that is personal information, then you are going to need to delete all of the notes. For letters and links, you've got three options. You either leave them intact, delete the letter records but leave the actual files in the background intact, or you delete the letter records and you delete the letter files in the background. And that's the same with the links as well. On the miscellaneous settings, you have an option to display the PII information window when a trader is closed. Well, we'll see this in action shortly, but essentially that is just a note at the bottom of that customer or supplier account that this data was anonymised on this date. The settings exactly the same for your employees that you might hold within the system. So this is just where you set the rules on what you want it to do with the notes, the letters and the links again. The notifications tab is just a way of you saying what background and foreground colour you want to set for your anonymisation messages. Once that's set, if you go to setup and user defined fields, what this allows you to do is mark which user defined fields you hold in the system, which also might contain personal information. So we all know user-defined fields in Exchequer allow you to store whatever information you feel relevant for that customer or supplier record. If you know that that contains personal information, for example, my sales rep here would have somebody's name within it, which is personal information, you simply tick the box to tell it that that user-defined field contains personal information or not. And what that means is that that's going to be included in your subject access request reports when you print those off if anybody asks for them. And it's also going to be included in the anonymisation process that actually happens for that account. So, talking of these subject access requests, if somebody does ask you to print a report of all of the personal information that you hold against them, because we've set the system up and it's recognised these personal identifiable fields, what it's going to do is give you a button here for PII tree. That will go away and look at all of those fields that it's marked with orange, and it will report back what information that you hold about that individual. At this point, you can either print the report or you can export the report to an XML file. So the actual anonymisation process itself, what that goes away and does, it doesn't delete this information, but it will jumble it up essentially, and we'll see what happens with that in a moment. The actual process itself is triggered when you set an account to closed. So without doing that, it's not going to set this account to be triggered to be anonymised. So essentially what you're saying is, I've stopped trading with you today, so I'm going to go into the status and I'm going to set your account to closed. It will immediately print the PII information screen so that you can print that report or export it. And then it's going to tell you that you've got an anonymisation pending, and it's going to tell you what date that is pending for. Now, for Exchequer to come up with this date, what it actually does is it firstly finds the last recorded activity for this particular customer or supplier. So it looks at the date of that last recorded transaction. It then finds the start date for the next financial year and adds on the number of years that you have set within the system to keep that data for. So currently that's just a year in terms of our setup for this purpose of the training. What it will do, you can see it hasn't automatically anonymised this data. That was actually due for the 1st of January 2017, and we can still see all of that information. And that is what the control centre is for. So if we look back in this control centre, it knows that this is due for anonymisation. If there were any that were pending that are due for anonymisation, say in 2019, they would show on this pending tab here. So you could have quite a few accounts on the due, you could have quite a few accounts on the pending, but it's really up to you to come into this anonymisation control centre and actually go and do the process itself. If you have several, you can tick this box here and tag all or untag all, or you can just manually tag the ones that you want to go ahead and anonymise. It's important to note here that once you have anonymised something, there is no going back. There is no getting that information back. It is completely blanked out, which is obviously the whole point of the GDPR module, to make sure that you're not holding that information for longer than you should be doing. Okay, so once we tick the accounts that we want to anonymise and hit the anonymise button, we'll just get this little confirmation prompt asking us to proceed with the actual process. If we say yes, it goes through and does that for you. Obviously that was fairly quick, but if you have quite a lot of accounts on there, it could take a little longer to go through and anonymise. If we go back and have a look at this account, we can now see that we can't see the company name anymore. And that is because that company name could hold personal identifiable information. What we can also see is, although the information is still there, it is jumbled up. And what Exchequer does with this process is it will replace an uppercase letter with another random uppercase letter. It will replace a lowercase letter with another random lowercase letter. It will replace a number with another random number. So it's completely randomised the data there. What you'll see is you've got this anonymisation banner across the bottom, which is telling us on what date this information was blanked out. that pretty much covers what the GDPR module does within Exchequer. It is just also relevant to note that GDPR specific entries are logged within your Exchequer audit trail. So within utilities and system setup and your system audit, it will tell you if it has anonymised any data and on what date. So this is telling us that it holds information within these fields, and we've told it to delete the notes, delete the records for the letters and the links and so on. It's not obviously going to store any of that information that was in there beforehand, because again, the whole purpose of the module is actually to clear down that information. So thank you for watching, and if you do have any further information on that module, then please just give the Exchequer support desk a call here at HBP Systems. Thank you.